My best friend sabotaged everything good in my life, for my own good. She was laughing until everything was exposed in front of her groom and his entire family. My best friend Tara and I met in middle school when she stood up to bullies picking on me for my secondhand clothes. She became my protector, my advisor, my closest friend for 15 years. I trusted her with everything, and she always said she'd look out for me because I was too nice to look out for myself. When I started dating Josh in college, Tara said he seemed shady and she'd keep an eye on him for me. 2 months later, she tearfully confessed they'd slept together. She said she'd seduced him to test his loyalty and he'd failed immediately. She said I should be grateful she exposed him before I got more invested. I was devastated, but Tara held me while I cried, saying she'd sacrificed her own integrity to protect me. Josh tried to explain, but I wouldn't listen. Found out a year later from his roommate that Tara had gotten him blackout drunk and he didn't remember anything. When my grandmother left me her vintage jewelry collection, Tara said I'd never wear such old-fashioned pieces and they'd just make me look desperate for attention. She offered to sell them for me to a dealer she knew. I said I wanted to keep them for sentimental value, but came home one day to find them gone. Tara had taken them and sold them for $3,000, which she used to buy me a makeover package because I deserved to look modern, not like someone's grandmother. She'd thrown away family heirlooms to buy me hair extensions and spray tans I never wanted. When I got promoted to department manager, Tara said the job would be too stressful for someone with my anxiety. She called my boss pretending to be me and declined the promotion, saying I needed to focus on my mental health. She told me after it was done, saying she'd saved me from a breakdown. I should be grateful she protected my well-being. My boss gave the promotion to someone else and never offered me another opportunity, thinking I couldn't handle responsibility. Every good thing that came into my life, Tara destroyed while telling me to be grateful. She'd flirt with guys who showed interest in me, then say they'd hit on her so they must be players. She'd tell my other friends I talked badly about them so they'd distance themselves, then say she was the only one I could really trust. She'd sign me up for things I didn't want, then cancel things I did want, always knowing what was best for me. The pattern continued for years until I met Adam at my cousin's wedding. He was kind, stable, and genuinely liked me. Tara immediately said he was too boring and probably had secrets. I didn't tell her we were dating for 6 months, the most peaceful months I'd had in years. When she found out, she was furious I'd kept secrets but said she'd forgive me and help me see Adam's true nature. She started her usual routine of showing up when we had dates, flirting with him, creating chaos. But Adam saw right through her. He told me Tara was sabotaging me on purpose and asked why I let her. That's when I finally started seeing the pattern clearly. When Adam proposed, I said yes, but didn't tell Tara. We planned a small wedding with just family. But Tara found out through Instagram and demanded to be maid of honor, saying after everything she'd done for me, she deserved it. She actually listed all the times she'd saved me from bad relationships, bad decisions, bad opportunities. She said I owed her for 15 years of protection. I made her maid of honor but had my own plans. See, Tara had gotten engaged too, to this rich guy named Colin who owned several restaurants. She was planning this massive wedding with a famous planner named Diane who did celebrity events. Tara bragged constantly about how Diane was the best, how the wedding would be perfect, how she deserved the fairy tale after spending so long taking care of me. I met with Diane privately and hired her to plan a surprise. The week before Tara's wedding, I had coffee with Diane and told her everything. How Tara had slept with Josh to save me from him. How she'd stolen my inheritance to improve me. How she'd sabotaged my promotion for my own good. I had 15 years of stories about Tara protecting me by destroying everything good in my life. Diane listened to 4 hours of examples with growing horror. She asked why I stayed friends with someone so toxic, and I said Tara had convinced me I couldn't survive without her protection. Diane asked if I wanted her to refuse to work the wedding, but I said no. I wanted Diane to know exactly who she was celebrating. The day of Tara's wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, Diane gave a speech as the planner who'd gotten to know the couple. She said she'd learned so much about Tara through her friend, specifically how Tara had always put others first. She listed every single thing Tara had done to me but framed as sacrifices. How Tara had slept with her best friend's boyfriend to test his loyalty. How she'd sold family heirlooms without permission to buy her friend makeup. How she'd declined her friend's promotion behind her back. How she'd isolated her friend from others to be the only support system. The room was silent as Diane kept going, listing 15 years of manipulation as examples of Tara's helpfulness. Colin's face got paler with each example. His family was staring at Tara in horror. Tara's face went white like someone had drained all the blood out of her. Diane kept talking, listing every single thing Tara had done to me, but making it sound like she was some kind of hero. Colin pushed his chair back hard enough that it scraped across the floor loud enough for everyone to hear. He didn't say anything, just stood up and walked out of the room like he couldn't stand to be there another second. His mother Marley got up right after him, and the look she gave Tara before she left made me feel cold even though I was across the room. Pure disgust, like Tara was something gross she'd stepped in. Diane finished up her speech with this big smile, thanking everyone for letting her share what she'd learned about the bride's generous nature. The room stayed completely frozen for what felt like forever. Nobody moved, nobody talked. Everyone just sat there trying to process what they'd heard. Then Colin's aunt stood up without looking at Tara and walked out. Then his uncle. Then his cousins. One by one, Colin's whole family got up and left without saying a word to Tara or anyone else. Tara finally found her voice and started screaming that I was lying, that I was jealous and trying to ruin her wedding because I couldn't stand to see her happy. Her voice got really high and shaky like she was about to cry. Diane stayed totally calm and said she had receipts for everything, including dates and details that only Tara would know because I'd told her the whole story. A few guests who were still sitting turned to stare at Tara with horror on their faces. One woman actually put her hand over her mouth like she was going to be sick. I sat at my table watching everything fall apart around me. Weird thing was, I felt calm. After 15 years of Tara controlling my life and ruining everything good, watching her lose control felt like I could finally breathe. Adam squeezed my hand under the table and leaned close to whisper that I did the right thing, that Tara needed to face consequences for what she'd done. Tara rushed over to me with mascara running down her face and black streaks. She grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt and demanded to know how I could betray her like this after everything she'd done for me. I looked right at her and said that was exactly the problem. Everything she did was designed to control me and make me smaller, not help me. She'd spent 15 years destroying my life while telling me to be grateful. Jeremy, Tara's father, stood up and tried to salvage things by suggesting everyone calm down and discuss this privately. Marley cut him off sharp and angry. She said there was nothing to discuss because her son was not marrying someone who hurt their best friend over and over while pretending to help. Jeremy tried to argue, but Marley just walked away. Colin came back into the room and his face looked completely blank like he'd shut down all his emotions. He told Tara they needed to talk alone and his voice sounded dead and flat. Tara grabbed his arm desperately, trying to get him to look at her, but he pulled away and walked toward one of the private conference rooms off the main ballroom. She had no choice but to follow him because everyone was staring at her. The remaining guests cleared out fast after that. Nobody wanted to stick around for whatever was about to happen. Within 5 minutes, the ballroom that had been full of people were almost empty. Just me and Adam sitting at our table and Diane who came over and sat down with us. She asked if I was okay, and I told her honestly that I didn't know yet. Watching Tara's world collapse felt good and terrifying at the same time because I'd never seen her lose control before. She'd always been the one in charge. Always the one who knew what was best. Always the one who had power. Seeing her scared and desperate was new. Adam drove me home and I sat in the passenger seat not saying anything. My brain kept trying to process what just happened and what was going to happen next. Part of me felt good that everyone finally saw what Tara really was. That I wasn't crazy or ungrateful like she'd always made me feel. Another part felt guilty for destroying her wedding and her relationship with Colin even though I knew she deserved consequences for what she'd done to me. The guilt made me mad at myself because why should I feel bad? She'd ruined my relationships, stolen my grandmother's jewelry, sabotaged my job, isolated me from friends, and controlled every part of my life for 15 years. She'd never felt guilty about any of it. Adam reached over and held my hand while he drove and didn't try to make me talk, which I was grateful for. When we got to my apartment, he came inside and made me tea while I sat on the couch staring at nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I kept replaying Diane's speech in my head, remembering the looks on everyone's faces when they realized what Tara had done. Colin's face going pale. Marley's disgust. The guests turning to stare at Tara in horror. Tara's mascara running down her face as she screamed at me. I thought about all the years I believed Tara was protecting me because I was too weak and stupid to take care of myself. She'd convinced me so completely that I needed her, that I couldn't survive without her guidance. When Josh tried to tell me the truth about what happened that night, I wouldn't listen, because I trusted Tara more than I trusted my own boyfriend. When my boss offered me the promotion, I believed Tara when she said I couldn't handle it. When guys showed interest in me, I believed they were players because Tara said so. She'd gotten inside my head so deep that I couldn't tell the difference between her voice and my own thoughts. Every decision I made, I heard her telling me what I really wanted or what was really best for me. I got up around 3 in the morning and made coffee even though I knew it would keep me awake longer. Adam was asleep in my bed and I sat at my kitchen table in the dark thinking about everything. My phone was on silent, but I could see the screen lighting up over and over with calls and texts. I didn't look at them because I knew they were from Tara and I wasn't ready to deal with whatever she was going to say. Part of me wanted to read them to see if she was sorry, if she finally understood what she'd done wrong. Another part knew she probably wasn't sorry at all, that she was probably angry at me for ruining her perfect wedding and making her look bad in front of Colin's family. The Tara I knew would never admit she'd done anything wrong. She'd find a way to make this my fault, to say I was lying or exaggerating or trying to hurt her because I was jealous. The sun started coming up and I watched it get light outside my kitchen window. Adam came out of the bedroom looking worried and asked if I'd slept at all. I told him no, and he sat down with me and didn't say anything about how I needed to rest or take care of myself. He just sat there with me while the morning got brighter, and my phone kept lighting up with messages I wasn't going to read. I thought about how different he was from Tara, how he let me make my own choices and trusted me to know what I needed. When I told him I wasn't ready to look at the messages, he didn't push or tell me I was avoiding things or say I needed to face reality. He just said okay and asked if I wanted breakfast. That's when I started crying. Not sad crying, but relief crying, because I finally had someone who didn't try to control me while claiming it was for my own good. I woke up around 7 the next morning to my phone buzzing so much it fell off the nightstand. Adam was still asleep, and I grabbed the phone off the floor to see 32 messages from a number I didn't recognize. The first message said it was Delilah, and I sat up straighter because I'd only met Tara's younger sister maybe 5 times in 15 years. Tara always said Delilah was dramatic and jealous, so we shouldn't spend much time around her. The messages kept coming while I scrolled through them. Delilah said she'd been at the rehearsal dinner sitting in the back with some cousins. She said she watched Diane's speech and started crying because finally someone else saw what Tara really was. She apologized over and over for never speaking up about how Tara treated me. She said she'd suspected for years, but Tara had convinced their whole family that Delilah was the problem sister, the one who caused trouble and made things up for attention. She said Tara had been doing similar things to her their whole lives, but in different ways. She said watching me finally expose Tara made her feel like she wasn't crazy after all. I sat there reading message after message, my hands shaking a little because I'd never considered that Tara might have other victims. I'd been so focused on my own experience that I didn't think about how someone who manipulated me for 15 years probably manipulated other people too. Delilah's last message asked if we could meet for coffee because she had things to tell me about Tara that I needed to know. I texted back that I'd meet her that afternoon at a cafe near my apartment. Adam woke up and asked if I was okay because I was just sitting there staring at my phone. I told him about Delilah's messages, and he said it made sense that Tara's sister would have seen her true nature up close. He offered to come to the coffee meeting with me, but I said I wanted to hear what Delilah had to say without making her uncomfortable. I got dressed and tried to eat breakfast, but my stomach was too twisted up thinking about what Delilah might tell me. Part of me wondered if this was another one of Tara's tricks, if she'd somehow convinced her sister to meet me and try to make me feel guilty. But the messages had seemed so genuine and desperate, like Delilah had been waiting years to talk to someone who would understand. I got to the cafe 20 minutes early and ordered coffee I couldn't drink. Delilah showed up right on time looking nervous and tired. She was 23, 4 years younger than Tara, with the same dark hair but softer features. She sat down across from me and immediately started crying. She said she was sorry for being emotional, but she'd been up all night thinking about everything. I told her to take her time, and she wiped her eyes and started talking. She said growing up with Tara was like living with someone who was always 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Their parents thought Tara was perfect because she was helpful and responsible and always looking out for Delilah. But what their parents saw as helpfulness was actually Tara controlling every aspect of Delilah's life. Tara would volunteer to help Delilah with homework, then criticize everything she did until Delilah felt stupid. Tara would offer to introduce Delilah to her friends, then tell those friends that Delilah was shy and awkward, so they'd treat her like a charity case. Tara would sign Delilah up for activities, then tell their parents Delilah was too anxious to follow through when Delilah tried to quit things she never wanted to do in the first place. Delilah said when she was 14 she finally made a good friend at the school named Maya, who actually liked her for herself. Tara immediately started coming around more, being super friendly to Maya, offering to drive them places and help them with projects. Within 2 months, Maya stopped talking to Delilah completely. Years later, Maya admitted that Tara had told her Delilah was obsessed with her and making up stories about them being best friends when Maya just felt sorry for her. Delilah said she tried to tell their parents what Tara was doing, but Tara would cry and say Delilah was jealous of her and making things up. Their dad, Jeremy, would tell Delilah she needed to be grateful for having such a caring older sister. Delilah said she spent years thinking she was the problem, that she was too sensitive or too dramatic or too needy. Watching Diane list everything Tara had done to me felt like watching her own life played back, but with someone else as the victim. She said it was proof that she hadn't imagined it, that Tara really was cruel and manipulative, not helpful and protective like everyone believed. I asked Delilah if she knew anything about what happened after Colin and Tara's private conversation last night. Delilah nodded and said Colin had called off the wedding around midnight. She'd heard about it from their cousin who'd heard it from Colin's sister. Tara had apparently tried everything to change his mind. She cried and said I was lying because I was jealous of her happiness. She said I'd always been unstable and she'd spent 15 years protecting me from myself. She claimed I was making things up to ruin her wedding because I couldn't stand to see her succeed. But Colin had sat there listening to Diane list specific incidents with dates and details that I couldn't have known unless they were true. He'd asked Tara to explain each one and she couldn't come up with good answers. She'd tried to reframe everything as sacrifices she'd made out of love for me, but Colin saw through it. He told her he couldn't marry someone who'd systematically destroyed their best friend's life while claiming to help them. He said if she could do that to someone she claimed to love, he didn't want to find out what she'd do to him. Delilah said Tara had been calling her all night trying to get her to call me and convince me to tell everyone I'd lied. Delilah refused and Tara screamed at her that she was a terrible sister who'd always been jealous and was finally getting her revenge. Delilah said she'd blocked Tara's number after that because she was done being manipulated. She said watching me stand up to Tara gave her the courage to finally set boundaries with her sister after 23 years of abuse. We sat there for another hour while Delilah told me more stories about growing up with Tara. How Tara would break Delilah's things, then buy her new things, so their parents would praise Tara for being generous. How Tara would tell Delilah's boyfriends that Delilah had cheated on them or had STDs. or was using them for money. How Tara had convinced their parents not to help pay for Delilah's college because Delilah wasn't responsible enough to handle the academic pressure. Every story made me feel sick because I recognized the same patterns Tara had used on me. The same manipulation disguised as help. The same isolation disguised as protection. The same cruelty disguised as love. When I got home that afternoon, my phone had 17 missed calls from Tara's number. I didn't listen to the voicemails right away because I wasn't ready to hear her voice. Adam asked if I wanted him to listen to them first, but I said no, I needed to do it myself. I sat on the couch and started playing them one by one. The first few were Tara screaming at me. She called me ungrateful and vindictive and said I'd destroyed her life over nothing. She said everything she'd ever done was to protect me from my own bad judgment. She said I was too stupid to see that she'd saved me from countless mistakes and now I was throwing it all back in her face. The messages in the middle were different. Her voice got quieter and she started crying. She begged me to call Colin and tell him I'd made everything up. She said she'd do anything if I just fixed what I'd broken. She said we were supposed to be best friends forever and I'd ruined everything. The last few messages were back to anger. She said I'd always been jealous of her, and this was my revenge for her being more successful and beautiful and loved than me. She said I'd spent 15 years using her, and now I was discarding her like trash. She said she'd make sure everyone knew what a liar I was. I sat there after the last message ended, feeling completely empty. Adam came and sat next to me, and I told him what the messages said. He asked if I felt guilty, and I said no. I felt sad. Sad that someone I'd loved for 15 years was so twisted that she genuinely believed her own lies. Sad that she'd spent so much energy controlling and manipulating me instead of just being my actual friend. Sad that even now, with everything exposed, she couldn't see what she'd done wrong. There was one voicemail I played twice because it showed how deep Tara's delusion went. Her voice was thick with crying, and she said I was supposed to be grateful for everything she'd sacrificed for me. She listed the times she'd protected me from bad relationships and bad decisions and bad opportunities. She said she'd given up so much of herself to keep me safe and I'd repaid her by destroying her wedding and her relationship. She actually said she'd sacrificed her integrity by sleeping with Josh to test his loyalty for me. She'd sacrificed her time by managing my career decisions for me. She'd sacrificed her honesty by being the only one willing to tell me hard truths about myself. The complete lack of awareness that she was the bad person in every story made me realize she'd been lying to herself as much as she'd been lying to me. She really did believe she was the hero protecting her weak friend from the cruel world. She couldn't see that she was the cruelty I'd needed protection from. Adam suggested I block her number, but I couldn't make myself do it yet. I told him I knew it was stupid, but part of me still felt connected to her after 15 years. Part of me kept waiting for her to suddenly understand what she'd done and apologize for real. Adam said that was normal and he wasn't going to push me. I had an appointment with my therapist Amelia the next day, and Adam said maybe she could help me figure out why I was having trouble cutting Tara off completely. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about Delilah's stories and Tara's voicemails and trying to understand how someone could be so cruel while genuinely believing they were being kind. I thought about all the years I'd trusted Tara's version of reality over my own instincts. How many times had I felt like something was wrong, but pushed the feeling away because Tara said I was being paranoid or oversensitive? How many opportunities had I missed because Tara convinced me I wasn't ready or capable or deserving? 3 days after the rehearsal dinner, Jeremy called me. Tara's dad had always been nice to me in a distant way, like he approved of me being Tara's friend, but didn't really know me as a person. His voice on the phone sounded tired and sad. He said he needed to talk to me about what happened and asked if we could meet somewhere. I told Adam about the call and he immediately said he was coming with me. I agreed to meet Jeremy at a diner near his office the next afternoon. Adam and I got there first and sat in a booth near the back. Jeremy showed up 10 minutes later looking like he hadn't slept much. He sat down and thanked me for meeting him. He ordered coffee and then just sat there for a minute like he didn't know how to start. Finally, he said he had no idea about most of what Tara had done to me. He said Tara had always talked about me like I was fragile and struggling, and she was the devoted friend helping me get through life. He said he'd always thought it was wonderful that Tara was so caring and protective of someone who needed her support. Hearing Diane list everything Tara had actually done made him physically sick. He said he was horrified and he wanted to understand the full scope of what happened so he could figure out how to help Tara get professional help. I spent the next 2 hours walking Jeremy through the major incidents. I told him about Josh and how Tara had gotten him drunk and then claimed they'd slept together to test his loyalty. I told him about my grandmother's jewelry and how Tara had stolen it and sold it to buy me a makeover I never wanted. I told him about the promotion and how Tara had called my boss pretending to be me and declined it because she decided it would be too stressful for me. I told him about every guy Tara had driven away, and every friend she'd isolated me from, and every decision she'd made for me while claiming she was protecting me. Jeremy's face got paler and more devastated with each story. He kept saying he had no idea, that Tara had always presented everything so differently. He said he'd thought he raised her to be kind and generous, not manipulative and cruel. He asked why I'd stayed friends with her for so long, and I explained how Tara had convinced me I couldn't survive without her guidance. How she'd systematically destroyed my confidence and independence until I believed I needed her protection from my own poor judgment. Jeremy sat there quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he told me something that made everything make more sense. He said Tara's mother had been similar. She'd constantly controlled his life under the guise of knowing what was best for him. She'd isolated him from his friends and family by claiming they were bad influences. She'd made all his decisions for him while telling him he was too emotional or too impulsive to think clearly. She'd convinced him he was lucky to have someone who cared enough to protect him from himself. He said it took him years to realize she was abusing him, not helping him. He finally divorced her when Tara and Delilah were teenagers because he couldn't take it anymore. He said he was sickened to realize Tara had learned these patterns from her mother. No, he'd thought by leaving his ex-wife he was protecting the girls from her influence. He never recognized that Tara had already absorbed her mother's manipulative behaviors and was using them on everyone around her. He said he'd failed both his daughters by not seeing what Tara was becoming and by not protecting Delilah from her sister's cruelty. He asked if there was anything he could do to make up for the years of damage Tara had caused me, and I told him honestly that I didn't know if anything could make up for 15 years of systematic manipulation. Jeremy left looking like he'd aged 10 years in one conversation, and I sat there staring at my cold coffee thinking about how manipulation gets passed down like a family recipe. Adam picked me up an hour later and didn't ask questions, just drove me home and held me while I processed everything Jeremy had told me about Tara's mother. 2 days passed before my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Wallace here, Colin's best man. He asked me to reach out because he wants to talk to you about what happened with Tara." I stared at that message for 20 minutes before responding, asking what Colin wanted to discuss. Wallace wrote back quickly saying Colin felt like an idiot for not seeing the red flags earlier, that Tara had started trying to control his business decisions and who he spent time with, but he'd blamed it on wedding stress instead of recognizing the pattern. I agreed to meet Colin but told Wallace I wanted Adam there with me, and Wallace said that was smart, that Colin understood I'd need support after everything Tara put me through. We met at one of Colin's restaurants 3 days later, after closing time when the place was empty except for us. Colin looked exhausted when he walked in, dark circles under his eyes and his expensive suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. He shook Adam's hand first, then mine, and thanked us both for coming before leading us to a corner booth away from the windows. He ordered coffee for everyone even though the kitchen was closed, making it himself behind the bar because he said he needed something to do with his hands. When he sat down across from us, he started talking immediately like he'd been holding these words in for days. He thanked me for exposing the truth before he married Tara, saying he couldn't imagine discovering all of this after making legal and financial commitments to someone so toxic. His voice cracked on the word toxic, and he had to stop and drink some coffee. Colin told us that after the rehearsal dinner, he'd gone back through the last year of their relationship looking for signs he'd missed. He found dozens of small moments that made sense now, times when Tara had pushed him to make decisions that would isolate him or give her more control. He pulled out his phone and showed us text messages where Tara had been pushing him to cut off Wallace, his business partner and best friend since college. She'd claimed Wallace was taking advantage of him, that Wallace's restaurant ideas were risky and would tank their business, that Colin needed to buy Wallace out before Wallace dragged them both down. Colin had defended Wallace at the time, but Tara had been relentless, bringing it up constantly and making him doubt his oldest friendship. Now he realized she was trying to isolate him from his support system, the exact same way she'd isolated me from other friends over 15 years. Wallace showed up 20 minutes into our conversation, apologizing for being late because he'd had to close his own restaurant first. He sat down next to Colin, and immediately the tension in Colin's shoulders relaxed, and I understood why Tara had wanted to destroy that friendship. Wallace ordered his own coffee and listened while Colin caught him up on what we'd been discussing, and then Wallace dropped his own bomb into the conversation. He said he'd noticed Tara flirting with him at their engagement parties and a few other events, touching his arm too much and standing too close and making comments that felt inappropriate. He'd found it weird but hadn't mentioned it to Colin because he didn't want to cause problems or seem like he was jealous of his best friend's relationship. Now he wondered if Tara was testing his loyalty the way she'd claimed to test Josh's, setting up a scenario where she could drive a wedge between Colin and his closest friend by either seducing Wallace or accusing him of hitting on her. The three of us sat there piecing together Tara's pattern like detectives solving a cold case. Colin pulled up more texts and emails, and Wallace added his own observations about Tara's behavior at social events. We realized Tara had been laying groundwork to control every aspect of Colin's life after marriage, from his business partnerships to his family relationships to his daily schedule. She'd been suggesting he needed to set boundaries with his mother Marley, claiming his family was too involved in his decisions. She'd been pushing him to hire her friend as his restaurant manager, someone who would report back to her about everything Colin did. She'd been talking about them moving to a different city after the wedding, somewhere fresh where they could start their life together away from everyone else's opinions. Colin looked sick as he realized he would have ended up as isolated and dependent on Tara as I was, believing she was protecting him while she destroyed his autonomy piece by piece. 2 weeks after the rehearsal dinner, I was finally starting to feel normal again when Braden called. My cousin sounded worried, asking how I was doing and saying several family members had been asking what happened with Tara after hearing rumors about a canceled wedding and public scandal. I told Braden the basics, that Tara's manipulation had been exposed and her wedding was off, and he was quiet for a long moment before saying he wasn't surprised. He admitted that family members had always found Tara's helpfulness toward me slightly off, like she was trying too hard to be needed, but nobody wanted to interfere in my friendship. I felt anger flash through me at that, thinking about how many people had noticed something wrong but said nothing while Tara spent 15 years destroying my life. Braden must have heard it in my voice because he quickly apologized, saying they should have spoken up, that they'd failed me by staying silent. I gave Braden permission to share the truth with family members who asked, tired of protecting Tara's reputation after she'd spent 15 years destroying mine. He promised to be honest about what happened and said he'd make sure everyone knew the full story of Tara's manipulation. 3 days later, my phone started buzzing with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in months, all expressing horror at what Tara had done and offering support. My aunt sent a long text apologizing for not seeing the signs, saying she'd always thought Tara seemed controlling, but assumed I was okay with it. My uncle called to say he'd never liked how Tara spoke about me when I wasn't around, always framing me as helpless and in need of guidance. Cousin after cousin reached out with similar stories, admitting they'd noticed Tara's condescending attitude, but hadn't wanted to cause drama by bringing it up. My former boss reached out a week later after hearing about the situation through mutual connections in our industry. She sent an email apologizing for believing Tara when she'd called pretending to be me to decline the promotion years ago. She said she'd always wondered why I'd seemed so capable and confident in person, but then made such a strange decision over the phone, and now she understood it wasn't my decision at all. She offered to serve as a reference for any future job applications, and mentioned there might be opportunities at her new company if I was interested in a fresh start. I wrote back thanking her and saying I'd definitely be interested in hearing about those opportunities, feeling something hopeful stir in my chest at the idea of reclaiming the career Tara had sabotaged. Josh sent me a message the next day saying his former roommate had seen the story about Tara on social media and told him what happened at the rehearsal dinner. His message was short but genuine, saying he was glad I finally knew the truth about that night in college, that he'd spent years feeling guilty about something that wasn't his fault. He said he hoped I was doing okay, and that he was sorry for whatever else Tara had done to me over the years, because he was sure that one incident wasn't isolated. I stared at that message for an hour before responding, asking if he'd be willing to meet for coffee so I could hear his side of what happened that night. He agreed immediately, suggesting a cafe near campus where we used to study together back when we were dating. I met Josh 3 days later at that same cafe, and it was strange seeing him after so many years. He looked older but still familiar, and when he smiled at me nervously, I remembered why I'd liked him in the first place. We ordered coffee and found a quiet corner booth, and then Josh started talking about that night with Tara. He explained that Tara had been offering to help him study for weeks, bringing him drinks at parties and being overly friendly in ways that made him uncomfortable, but that he'd dismissed as her being protective of me. The night it happened, she'd shown up at his dorm with a bottle of something strong, saying she wanted to apologize for being cold to him, and that we should all be friends. He remembered having 2 drinks, and then nothing else until he woke up confused and sick with Tara in his bed, having no memory of how they got there or what happened. When he tried to explain this to me back then, I wouldn't listen, because I trusted Tara completely, and believed her tearful confession about testing his loyalty. Josh said watching me choose Tara over him had hurt worse than losing the relationship, because it meant Tara had won, and he had no way to prove his innocence. I watched Josh's face while he talked about those weeks before everything fell apart, how Tara would show up at the library with coffee and offer to quiz him on biology terms. She'd sit close enough that her perfume filled the space between them and laugh at his jokes in a way that made him uncomfortable, but that he couldn't name as wrong because she was my best friend. She brought him drinks at parties, always something strong mixed with juice that tasted sweet and hid how much alcohol it contained. He remembered her touching his arm while they talked, leaning in to hear him over the music, finding excuses to be alone with him in quieter corners of apartments and dorm rooms. He'd thought she was being friendly, maybe even protective in her own way, checking to make sure he was good enough for me. The night it happened, she'd shown up at his door around 10 with a bottle of something clear that she said was vodka, but that hit him harder than vodka ever had. He remembered 2 drinks and feeling dizzy, then nothing until morning when he woke up sick and confused with Tara next to him looking satisfied. She'd told him not to worry, that she wouldn't tell me unless he tried to lie about it, and he'd been too ashamed and scared to fight her version of events. When he tried to explain to me later that he didn't remember anything, I'd screamed at him that he was making excuses, and that Tara had warned me he'd try to claim he was too drunk to know what he was doing. I sat there listening to Josh describe the setup Tara had engineered and felt sick, understanding how calculated it had been. She hadn't tested his loyalty. She'd manufactured a situation where she could destroy our relationship while making herself look like the hero who exposed a cheater. I apologized to Josh for not believing him back then, for choosing Tara's lies over his truth, and he reached across the table to touch my hand gently. He said he understood why I'd trusted her, that she'd spent years building herself up as my protector. So of course I believed her over someone I'd only known a few months. He said he'd been angry for a long time, but mostly he'd felt sad that Tara had won, and there was nothing he could do to prove his innocence. We talked for another hour about what happened after we broke up, how he'd spent the rest of college feeling guilty about something he hadn't done, and how Tara's manipulation had made him question his own memory and judgment. He'd eventually worked through it in therapy and moved on, but hearing what else Tara had done to me over the years made him realize that night was just one example of a much bigger pattern. When we said goodbye in the parking lot, Josh hugged me and said he was glad I finally got free from her. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Adam and a stack of blank paper, and we started making a timeline of everything I could remember Tara doing to sabotage my life. We started with Josh in college and worked forward through 15 years of incidents, both big and small. The jewelry she stole and sold, the promotion she declined pretending to be me, the guys she drove away by claiming they'd hit on her, the friends she isolated me from by saying they talked badly about me. We wrote down the time she signed me up for an expensive gym membership I couldn't afford, then got angry when I canceled it, saying she'd been trying to help me get healthy. The time she threw away my favorite jacket because she said it made me look poor and desperate. The time she told my coworkers I was looking for a new job so they stopped including me in projects, then said she'd heard rumors and was warning me that people thought I was disloyal. Every incident we wrote down revealed another layer of control disguised as care. Adam kept shaking his head as the list grew longer, saying he couldn't believe one person could be so consistently cruel while maintaining a facade of friendship. The list filled 6 pages by the time we finished, 6 pages of manipulation and sabotage spanning my entire adult life. Looking at it all written out made me understand the scope of what Tara had done, how she'd systematically removed every source of support and confidence I might have developed outside of her control. She'd kept me dependent on her by making sure I never had anyone else to turn to, or any achievements that might make me believe I could survive without her guidance. Adam put his arm around me while I stared at those 6 pages and cried, not for Tara, but for all the years I'd lost believing her lies about who I was and what I deserved. My first therapy session after the rehearsal dinner was 3 days later, and I brought the timeline Adam and I had made. Amelia read through all 6 pages without speaking, her expression growing more serious with each incident. When she finished, she set the papers down carefully and asked how I was feeling about everything that had happened. I told her I felt relieved and guilty and angry and sad all at the same time, that watching Tara's world collapse had been satisfying, but also terrifying because I'd never seen her lose control before. Amelia explained that what I was experiencing was grief, but not grief for losing Tara as she actually was, grief for losing the friendship I'd believed I had. She said I was mourning the protective best friend who never really existed, the person Tara had pretended to be while actually abusing me psychologically for 15 years. That grief was valid and necessary even though the relationship had been harmful, because I'd invested genuine love and trust into someone who used those feelings to control me. She helped me understand that Tara had been emotionally abusing me the entire time we were friends, using tactics like isolation, gaslighting, and manufactured dependence that were common in abusive romantic relationships, but that people didn't always recognize in friendships. The fact that Tara genuinely believed she was helping me made it more insidious, not less, because it meant she'd never have insight into how harmful her behavior was. Amelia said recovery would take time, that I'd spent 15 years having my judgment and confidence systematically destroyed, and rebuilding those things wouldn't happen overnight. She asked if I was still in contact with Tara, and I admitted I hadn't blocked her number yet, even though Tara had been calling and texting constantly since the rehearsal dinner. Amelia strongly suggested I block her immediately, explaining that any contact would just feed Tara's belief that she could still manipulate me and prevent me from fully separating from her influence. I blocked Tara's number that night after reading through the dozens of messages she'd sent over the past week. They'd started out pleading, begging me to tell everyone I'd lied, and that she'd never done any of those things. Then they'd shifted to angry, calling me ungrateful and cruel after everything she'd sacrificed for me over the years. The most recent ones were threatening, saying she'd tell everyone I was lying and destroy my reputation the way I'd destroyed hers, that she'd make sure no one ever believed anything I said again. Reading through the progression of messages showed exactly what Amelia had described, Tara cycling through different manipulation tactics trying to find one that would work to regain control over me. The threats in the final messages proved she still saw me as something she could control and punish, rather than a person with agency who'd finally escaped her. I hit the block button and felt both relieved and scared, knowing this was the final step in cutting Tara out of my life completely. Part of me worried she'd find other ways to contact me or try to turn people against me the way she'd done with other friends over the years. But a bigger part of me felt lighter knowing I wouldn't see her name pop up on my phone anymore. Delilah called me 2 days after I blocked Tara to say her sister had been calling her, constantly trying to get Delilah to convince me to recant everything. Tara had cried and raged and begged, cycling through the same manipulation tactics she'd tried on me through text messages. When Delilah refused and said she believed me completely, Tara had turned on her with the same venom she'd directed at me. She'd accused Delilah of being jealous of their relationship, of always trying to turn people against her, of being a bad sister who never appreciated anything Tara did for the family. Delilah said it was exactly like growing up with Tara all over again, the same patterns of manipulation and blame that had made her childhood miserable. She'd finally told Tara she needed to take responsibility for her actions and get professional help, and Tara had screamed that there was nothing wrong with her, that everyone else was the problem. Delilah had hung up and blocked Tara's number after that, choosing her own well-being over family obligation for the first time in her life. She said she felt guilty, but also relieved, that watching Tara spiral after losing control over me had made her realize she didn't want to spend the rest of her life managing her sister's manipulation. We talked about how hard it was to set boundaries with family members even when they were harmful, and Delilah said she was starting therapy to work through growing up with Tara as a sister. She thanked me for exposing Tara publicly, because it had given her permission to finally acknowledge how toxic their relationship had always been. Jeremy called me later that same week sounding exhausted and defeated. He said he'd been trying to convince Tara to start therapy, but she absolutely refused to go because she didn't think she'd done anything wrong. She insisted everyone was overreacting, and that I'd blown things out of proportion because I was jealous of her relationship with Colin. She claimed she'd always had my best interests at heart, and that exposing Josh as a cheater, selling my jewelry to improve my appearance, and declining my promotion to protect my mental health were all acts of love and sacrifice. Jeremy said trying to talk to her was like hitting a wall, that she had zero insight into how her behavior had harmed me, and genuinely believed she was the victim in this situation. He was struggling with how to help someone who completely lacked awareness of their own harmful patterns, and who saw any suggestion that she needed help as an attack. He asked if I had any advice, and I told him honestly that I didn't, that I'd spent 15 years trying to understand Tara's logic and had finally accepted that her reality was fundamentally different from actual reality. I said the best thing he could do was protect himself and Delilah from Tara's manipulation and let her face the natural consequences of her actions without trying to fix things for her. Jeremy sighed and said that was probably right, but it was hard watching his daughter self-destruct while refusing any help. Marley, Colin's mother, reached out through email a few days later saying she wanted to thank me personally for exposing Tara before the wedding happened. She said she'd had uncomfortable feelings about Tara from the beginning but couldn't put her finger on exactly why, just a sense that something was off about how Tara interacted with Colin and his family. Looking back now with the context of what I'd revealed, she could see all the red flags she'd dismissed as personality quirks or wedding stress. Tara had been making comments about how Colin's family was too involved in his business decisions, suggesting he needed to establish better boundaries with his mother and brother. She'd been pushing him to move across the country for a restaurant opportunity that would have isolated him from everyone he knew. She'd been critical of Wallace, Colin's business partner and best friend, claiming he was taking advantage of Colin's generosity and that Colin would be more successful without him. Marley said she now realized these were all early steps in isolating Colin the same way Tara had isolated me, setting up a situation where she'd be his only support system and source of guidance. She was grateful I'd exposed the truth before Colin married someone who would have spent the rest of his life controlling and diminishing him while claiming to protect him. She said Colin was doing okay, processing everything and working with his own therapist to understand how he'd missed the warning signs. She invited me and Adam to dinner sometime to thank us properly, and I accepted because it felt good to have my actions validated by someone who understood what could have happened if I hadn't intervened. Over the following weeks, I started noticing changes in myself that I hadn't expected. My anxiety, which had been a constant companion for years, decreased significantly without Tara's voice in my head, telling me I was making mistakes and needed her guidance. I slept better, waking up without that immediate sense of dread about what Tara might criticize or sabotage that day. I stopped second-guessing every decision I made, from what to wear, to what to eat, to how to spend my free time, because I wasn't waiting for her to tell me I was wrong. Small choices that used to feel overwhelming became simple again, because I wasn't filtering everything through the question of what Tara would think. Adam noticed the difference too, saying I seemed lighter and more confident, that I smiled more easily, and didn't apologize constantly for things that weren't my fault. I started reconnecting with old friends Tara had driven away over the years, reaching out to explain what had happened and apologizing for believing her lies about them. Most of them were understanding and said they'd suspected Tara was manipulating me, but hadn't known how to help. Having those friendships back felt like reclaiming parts of myself I'd thought were lost forever. Adam and I set a date for our wedding 2 months out, and planning it felt completely different from anything I'd experienced before. Every choice was actually mine, from the simple flowers to the small venue to the short guest list of people who genuinely supported us. Tara had always inserted herself into every decision I made, telling me what I really wanted or what would be better for me, and planning without her interference felt joyful instead of stressful. Adam asked what I wanted at every step and actually listened to my answers instead of telling me I was wrong. We picked a restaurant we both loved for the reception and kept the ceremony short and meaningful instead of elaborate and performative. I invited only people I trusted, people who'd never tried to control or manipulate me, creating the celebration Tara never would have allowed me to have. Looking at the guest list without her name on it felt strange and sad and liberating all at the same time, acknowledging that the person who'd been my closest friend for 15 years would never be part of my life again. Adam squeezed my hand and reminded me that the people who would be there were the ones who actually cared about my happiness, not the ones who claimed to care while systematically destroying everything good in my life. 3 weeks passed, and I was loading groceries into my car when someone touched my arm. I turned to see a woman about my age staring at me with this weird, intense look. She said she was sorry to bother me, but she needed to talk about Tara. My stomach dropped because I wasn't ready to discuss any of it with strangers. She said her name was something generic. I honestly can't remember now because Tara had pushed her out of my life years ago when we all hung out together. She pulled me aside between our cars and started talking fast like she'd been holding this in forever. She admitted Tara did similar things to her, driving away her boyfriend by flirting with him constantly, then saying he was trash anyway. Tara criticized every career choice she made, telling her she wasn't smart enough for grad school or capable enough to start her own business. She said she never had the courage to confront Tara about it, because Tara always made it seem like tough love, like she was just being honest when everyone else was too nice to tell the truth. Watching me stand up to Tara at the rehearsal dinner inspired her to finally set boundaries. She'd blocked Tara on everything and started seeing a therapist to understand why she accepted that treatment for so long. She thanked me for being brave enough to expose what Tara really was, because it gave her permission to admit she'd been manipulated too. I stood there holding my grocery bags feeling sick, as I realized Tara probably had multiple victims beyond just me. How many people had she inserted herself into their lives, systematically controlled them while convincing them she was helping? The scope of damage she'd caused over the years hit me hard. This woman wasn't the only one. Tara had a pattern, a whole system of finding people she could dominate, and then isolating them from anyone who might help them see the truth. I thought about all the friends Tara had mentioned over the years, people who'd supposedly disappointed her or betrayed her trust. Now I wondered how many of them had just tried to escape her control. Delilah called me that afternoon, sounding exhausted but relieved. She said their father Jeremy was finally seeing how Tara treated her growing up. He'd spent the past few weeks talking to Delilah about their childhood and apologizing for not protecting her from her sister's cruelty. Delilah told him stories about Tara ruining her birthday parties, telling her friends Delilah talked badly about them, sabotaging her college applications by hiding recommendation letters. Jeremy kept saying he thought it was normal sister rivalry, that he didn't realize the extent of Tara's manipulation until he heard Diane's speech listing everything she'd done to me. The family was splitting apart as Jeremy and Delilah united against Tara's behavior, while Tara insisted everyone was ganging up on her unfairly. Tara kept calling Jeremy, crying about how her own family abandoned her when she needed support, but he wasn't buying it anymore. Delilah said it felt good to finally have her father believe her after years of being told she was too sensitive or jealous of her older sister. She thanked me for exposing Tara because it freed her too. 1 month after the rehearsal dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from Diane. She asked how I was doing and said she'd been thinking about me since that night. She wrote that exposing Tara was the right thing to do, that she'd worked with enough controlling people in the wedding industry to recognize genuine harm when she heard about it. Diane said she'd planned hundreds of weddings and dealt with all kinds of difficult personalities, but Tara's systematic destruction of someone who trusted her was something else entirely. She told me not to feel guilty for what happened, because Tara created her own consequences through 15 years of manipulation. Diane mentioned she'd had to deal with Tara demanding a refund and threatening to sue her for ruining the wedding. Tara sent long emails accusing Diane of defamation and claiming everything in the speech was lies designed to destroy her reputation. Diane's lawyer shut that down fast by pointing out that truth is a complete defense against defamation. Everything Diane said in her speech came directly from me with specific dates and details, and Tara had admitted to all of it over the years while framing it as helpful. There was no case. Tara couldn't sue someone for telling the truth about her actions, especially when she'd bragged about those same actions to justify controlling me. My former boss reached out 2 weeks later, asking if I wanted to come in for an interview at her new company. She'd moved to a bigger firm with better opportunities, and thought of me immediately when a position opened up. The job was actually better than the promotion Tara had sabotaged years ago, with more responsibility and better pay. I went to the interview nervous but excited, wearing clothes I picked out myself without anyone telling me they made me look desperate or trying too hard. My former boss smiled when she saw me and said I seemed different, more confident than she remembered. I told her I'd removed a toxic influence from my life and was rebuilding everything that person had damaged. She understood immediately, and said the position was mine if I wanted it. She apologized again for believing Tara when she called pretending to be me to decline the promotion. She said she should have verified it directly with me instead of assuming, and she wouldn't make that mistake again. I accepted the job offer feeling proud of myself for rebuilding what Tara tried to take from me. That evening, Adam took me out to celebrate, and I realized this was the first major achievement in years that Tara hadn't been able to ruin or diminish. No one was telling me I didn't deserve it, or that I'd gotten lucky, or that I should be grateful to someone else for making it happen. This success was completely mine. Planning my wedding to Adam felt entirely different from watching Tara plan hers. Every choice was about what we actually wanted, not about impressing people or proving something to the world. Tara's wedding had been this massive production designed to show everyone how perfect her life was, how much she deserved celebration after supposedly sacrificing so much for others. My celebration was about genuine love and partnership between two people who actually supported each other instead of one person controlling the other. We picked simple flowers because we liked them, not because they were trendy or expensive. We chose a small venue because we wanted intimate and meaningful, not because we couldn't afford better. The guest list included only people who genuinely cared about our happiness, people who'd never tried to manipulate or control us under the guise of protection. Looking at our plans spread across the kitchen table, I felt peaceful instead of stressed. Tara would have hated everything about it, would have told me I was settling or not thinking big enough or missing opportunities to make it special. But this simplicity felt more meaningful than Tara's extravagant plans ever were, because it was real. Braden called me the next week with an offer that made me cry happy tears. He said he wanted to host our wedding at his home where Adam and I first met at his wedding reception. Everything would come full circle, getting married in the same place where I'd met the person who helped me see Tara's manipulation clearly. Braden said his house had beautiful gardens and plenty of space for our small guest list, and he'd be honored to be part of our celebration after watching me go through so much pain with Tara over the years. I accepted immediately, grateful for family who actually supported me instead of manipulating me under the guise of help. Adam loved the idea too, saying it felt right to start our marriage in a place that held good memories instead of trying to create something completely separate from our history. We drove over to Braden's house that weekend to walk through the space and plan where everything would go. Standing in his garden where I'd first talked to Adam about books and travel and normal things without someone interfering, I felt like I was reclaiming my life piece by piece. 6 weeks had passed since the rehearsal dinner when Jeremy called. His voice sounded tired and worn down in a way I'd never heard before. He told me Tara had finally agreed to start therapy after Colin threatened legal action over some financial stuff she'd tried to pull during their relationship. Jeremy said the therapist was helping her see patterns in her behavior. He sounded hopeful that maybe professional help would create some awareness for Tara about what she'd done to people. I listened to him talk about therapy sessions and breakthroughs and progress reports. Part of me wanted to care, but mostly I felt nothing. Jeremy asked if I'd consider talking to Tara eventually, maybe after she'd made more progress in treatment. I told him I was glad she was getting help, but made it clear I wouldn't be part of her recovery process. Amelia had helped me understand that protecting myself from more harm was more important than Tara's healing journey. That journey had to be her own responsibility without me involved in any way. Jeremy went quiet for a minute, then said he understood, and he was sorry for everything Tara had put me through. He hung up, and I sat there feeling relieved that I'd set that boundary without guilt. Delilah started meeting me for coffee every week after that conversation with Jeremy. At first, we talked about Tara and what she'd done to both of us. But gradually, our conversations shifted to other things like work and dating and normal friend stuff. Delilah was rebuilding her life away from Tara's shadow, and it showed in how she carried herself. She'd gotten a new job at a marketing firm and started dating someone who actually respected her boundaries. We bonded over understanding what it felt like to escape someone who controlled us, while claiming it was love and protection. One afternoon at our usual coffee shop, Delilah told me she'd blocked Tara's number permanently. She said she was done feeling guilty for choosing herself over family obligation. I told her I was proud of her for making that choice. We'd both spent too many years letting Tara convince us we owed her something for her so-called sacrifices. 2 months after everything exploded at the rehearsal dinner, I found myself going through old photos on my phone. Pictures of me and Tara at birthday parties and vacations and random nights out over 15 years. And I could look at them without feeling that complicated mix of grief and anger that used to hit me. The photos just showed 2 people who used to know each other, nothing more. I mentioned this to Amelia during my next therapy session, and she said it was healthy progress. She explained I was finally separating who I thought Tara was from who she actually is. The person in those photos was someone I'd created in my head to make sense of the abuse. The real Tara had always been the manipulator, not the protector. Understanding that difference meant I was healing from 15 years of psychological damage. Adam suggested we try premarital counseling before the wedding, and I agreed immediately. During our first session, I admitted my biggest fear was not recognizing manipulation in the future after being fooled by Tara for so long. The counselor listened carefully, then started teaching us both how to identify red flags in relationships. She helped me understand what healthy boundaries looked like and how to trust my own judgment again. Adam participated fully in every exercise, showing me through his actions that he wanted a partnership based on honesty and respect. The counselor gave me tools to recognize when someone was trying to control me versus genuinely caring about my well-being. Over several weeks of sessions, I started feeling more confident in my ability to protect myself without needing someone else to do it for me. Those were skills Tara had systematically destroyed over 15 years, convincing me I was too weak and naive to make good decisions alone. My wedding day arrived on a sunny Saturday in early fall. Only 40 guests filled Braden's garden, people who genuinely cared about me and Adam without any hidden agendas. As I got ready in Braden's guest room, I thought about how Tara would have tried to control every detail of this day. She would have insisted on different flowers or a different dress or a different venue. She would have made suggestions that sounded helpful but were really about making me doubt my choices. She would have found ways to make herself the center of attention while claiming she just wanted my day to be perfect. But she wasn't here, and I felt grateful for her absence. Every choice Adam and I made was ours alone without anyone diminishing our joy or creating drama. The simplicity felt more meaningful than any elaborate production could have been. Walking down the aisle between rows of chairs in Braden's garden, I focused completely on Adam waiting for me. My mind felt quiet and peaceful, without any voice telling me I was making a mistake or didn't deserve this happiness. The absence of Tara's manipulation felt like freedom I didn't know was possible before. Adam smiled at me as I reached him and took my hands in his. We said our vows in front of people who actually supported us and wanted us to be happy. No one was plotting to sabotage us or testing our relationship or creating chaos disguised as help. For the first time in 15 years, I felt completely present in a good moment without waiting for someone to ruin it. During the reception, several family members pulled me aside separately to tell me how different I seemed. My aunt said I looked more confident and relaxed than she'd seen me in years. My cousin mentioned I was smiling more genuinely instead of that forced smile I used to have around Tara. Braden's wife said I seemed lighter, like I'd been carrying weight I finally put down. I realized they'd all noticed Tara's impact on me even when I couldn't see it myself. They'd watched me shrink and doubt myself and defer to Tara's judgment about everything. They were relieved to see me thriving without her constant interference and manipulation. Their observations confirmed what I already knew, but it helped to hear other people recognize the change too. Braden gave a toast halfway through the reception that made me cry happy tears. He talked about watching me meet Adam at his wedding 3 years ago, and knowing immediately that this relationship was different. He said Adam saw and valued who I really was, instead of trying to control or diminish me. He mentioned how Adam had helped me recognize patterns I couldn't see on my own, and supported me through difficult decisions. Braden raised his glass and said he was honored to host our celebration in the same place where our story began. Everyone cheered, and I looked at Adam through my tears, grateful for someone who genuinely wanted me to be strong and independent instead of weak and dependent. Colin showed up briefly near the end of the reception to congratulate us. He'd become friendly with Adam through their shared experience of dealing with Tara and her manipulation tactics. They'd met for drinks a few times to process everything that happened and support each other through the aftermath. Colin looked genuinely happy for the first time since I'd known him, relaxed instead of stressed and controlled. He mentioned he was dating someone new, someone his friends and family actually liked and trusted. His mother had given her approval, and his business partner Wallace thought she was great for him. Colin said he was grateful I'd exposed Tara before the wedding, because discovering the truth after marriage would have been so much worse. He shook Adam's hand and hugged me carefully, then left to let us enjoy our celebration. Watching him walk away, I felt glad we'd both escaped Tara's control and were building healthier lives without her poison affecting everything good. 3 months after my wedding, Jeremy called me one last time. He said Tara had moved to a different city for a fresh start. Therapy had helped her understand some of her behaviors, but she still wasn't fully accepting responsibility. He was working on accepting that she might never truly change. His voice sounded tired and sad, like he'd spent months hoping for a different outcome. He asked if I'd consider talking to her someday, maybe years from now when she'd made more progress. I told him I hoped Tara found peace and genuine help, but I was firm that I wouldn't ever allow her back into my life regardless of how much therapy she did. Some damage was too extensive to repair. I'd built a healthier life without her manipulation poisoning everything good. Jeremy was quiet for a moment, then said he understood. He thanked me for being honest and said he respected my boundaries. We ended the call knowing it would probably be our last conversation. I felt sad but also relieved to have that chapter finally closed. Delilah and I met for dinner at this new restaurant near my apartment. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years, more relaxed and confident. We ordered food and talked about work and her new apartment. Then she mentioned that Tara had tried to contact her from the new city. Tara was already complaining about how people there didn't appreciate her helpfulness. She'd sent Delilah long messages about how everyone was ungrateful and how she was just trying to be a good friend to her new coworkers. Delilah had blocked her after reading the first few messages. She chose her own well-being over family obligation. I told her I was proud of her for that boundary. Delilah smiled and said it felt good to finally put herself first, instead of managing Tara's feelings. We spent the rest of dinner talking about our plans and dreams without anyone trying to control or diminish them. At my new job, I was thriving in ways I'd never experienced before. My boss called me into her office one afternoon to discuss a project I'd completed. She praised my confidence and initiative, saying I'd shown real leadership. The recognition felt strange at first because I'd spent years being told I wasn't capable of handling responsibility. Tara had convinced me I didn't have those qualities. But here was proof that she'd been wrong. I was getting promoted to senior coordinator with a significant raise. My coworkers respected my ideas and asked for my input. Nobody was sabotaging my work or diminishing my achievements. I was finally seeing what I could accomplish when someone wasn't actively working to keep me small and dependent. Adam and I settled into married life in our small apartment. We made decisions together as equals, talking through everything from furniture choices to weekend plans. He encouraged my independence instead of trying to control me under the guise of protection. When I got nervous about taking on new projects at work, he reminded me of my capabilities without taking over or deciding for me. We had disagreements sometimes, but we worked through them by actually listening to each other. I was learning what a healthy partnership looked like without someone constantly interfering or creating chaos. Some mornings I'd wake up and just feel grateful for the peace, for not having to worry about what Tara would destroy next. 6 months after the exposure, I met my former friend Sarah for coffee. She'd also experienced Tara's manipulation years ago before drifting away from our friend group. Sarah looked great, confident, and happy. She was dating someone healthy who actually supported her goals. Her career had taken off after she'd stopped letting Tara undermine her choices. We talked about how much energy Tara must have spent orchestrating so much control over so many people. Sarah laughed and said Tara could have used that energy to actually build something positive instead of tearing others down. We swapped stories about the ridiculous things Tara had done, finding humor in situations that had once caused us pain. It felt good to connect with someone who understood exactly what I'd been through. Amelia and I sat in her office discussing my progress. She said I'd made significant strides in healing from 15 years of psychological abuse. We talked about terminating regular therapy since I'd developed healthy coping strategies and strong boundaries. Amelia was proud of how far I'd come from the woman who believed she needed Tara's protection to survive. I was proud of myself too. The work had been hard, facing all the ways I'd been manipulated and controlled, but I'd done it and come out stronger. Amelia said I could always come back if I needed support, but she thought I was ready to move forward on my own. We scheduled one final session for next month to wrap everything up properly. I started volunteering with a support group for people dealing with manipulative friendships. The facilitator had reached out after hearing my story through mutual connections. Every Tuesday night, I sat in a circle with 8 other people who were trying to escape or recover from toxic relationships. I shared my experience with Tara, helping others recognize patterns of control disguised as care. One woman cried when I described how Tara had isolated me from other friends, saying her best friend did the exact same thing. Another man talked about his college roommate who sabotaged his job interviews while claiming to protect him from workplace stress. Turning my painful experience into something that helped others felt meaningful and empowering. I was taking the worst thing that had happened to me and using it to help people avoid the same trap. One year after exposing Tara at her rehearsal dinner, I stood in my kitchen making breakfast while Adam got ready for work. Sunlight came through the window, and I realized I was genuinely happy and free in ways I never imagined possible. I had a loving marriage where my partner saw me as an equal. I had a successful career where my work was recognized and valued. I had healthy friendships built on mutual respect instead of control. Most importantly, I trusted my own judgment and knew I was strong enough to protect myself without someone claiming to do it for me. The scars from 15 years of manipulation were still there, but they didn't define me anymore. I'd survived Tara's abuse and built a life she could never touch again. That felt like the biggest victory of all.